The blueprint for our life lay sprawled across the massive drafting table, precise lines and intricate notes etched into paper and digital renderings alike. I traced the contours with my fingertip, absorbing the ambition and perfection of my own creation. Cassandra, lead architect, I reminded myself, standing in the skeletal shell of the corporate tower I had designed from the ground up. Gideon, my husband and the developer behind this empire, slid a tablet across the table. His eyes gleamed in the harsh fluorescent lights, sharp and calculating. "The contracts are signed, Cassandra," he whispered, adjusting his tie as if it were armor. "Dahlia will handle the internal affairs now. Your strict adherence to structural safety was costing us millions in delayed deadlines. Dahlia understands maximizing efficiency over ethics." I froze, staring at the tablet as if it might bite. Dahlia, the secretary who smiled with deadly precision every day outside my office, was now officially in charge. My vision, my insistence on integrity in every beam and bolt, was being erased in favor of speed, profit, and deception. The weight of betrayal hit me like a falling beam. You can't," I stammered, my fingers clutching the edge of the drafting table. My mind raced, tracing every calculation, every material choice, every safety protocol I had insisted upon. All the work that had kept this tower alive, stable, and safe, now being rewritten by greed. Gideon's grin was thin and merciless. "I can, Cassandra. And I will. Dahlia will keep things on schedule. You can step aside now." I wanted to scream, to lash out, to undo the decision. I knew I couldn't. But the tower loomed around me like a testament to my failure, a building that would rise, polished and gleaming, yet built on lies. My hands shook as I realized the stakes. This wasn't just betrayal of my heart. It was betrayal of lives. Every worker, every future tenant, every structure I had designed depended on integrity. And now it would be ignored. Dahlia's presence was a dagger. She appeared at the doorway with a perfunctory smile, her posture perfect, her efficiency a mask over ruthlessness I hadn't fully appreciated. "I'll see to it, Cassandra," she said sweetly, a phrase that tasted like poison. I left the tower that day with a promise burning in my chest. Gideon could build his empire with fraud and shortcuts. He could wrap lies in glass and steel. But I would not let him, or Dahlia, erase the truth. I would ensure his empire collapsed, floor by fraudulent floor. The sky darkened above the skeletal steel of the rising tower. And I, Cassandra, architect and truth-bearer, silently vowed that one day, the foundation of his empire would be exposed, not just to the world, but to the very ground that had borne his deceit. I woke in the university design studio, the scent of foam models and fresh drafting paper filling my senses. I was 20, full of ethical fervor and idealism, immersed in architecture with all-consuming passion. The date on the calendar read May 20th, 2021. The memory of betrayal still lingered like smoke in my chest, but I knew I had been given a chance to change everything, to prevent Gideon and Dahlia from creating the web of deception I had once endured. I immediately thought of Arthur, the construction manager I had met years earlier, a man whose integrity and experience made him the only person I could trust to uphold safety above profit. Gideon had dismissed him as too tedious, but Arthur had always refused to compromise on standards, insisting that structures be safe, legal, and lasting. I found him on a construction site, bent over logs and safety checks, scrutinizing every detail with meticulous precision. I approached him cautiously, holding back my shock and awe. "Arthur," I whispered, pointing to a log detailing central support beams. "That beam has a latent stress fracture. It will fail in 5 years if not reinforced. I know the exact cause. I need your commitment to absolute, uncompromised safety." Arthur looked up, his gray eyes intense, measuring me as if he could read the truth in my expression. "If you know this, you know the severity. Why tell me?" "Because you respect the foundation," I replied. "Gideon and Dahlia only respect appearances. This isn't just a beam, it's the difference between safety and catastrophe. I need your integrity." He considered me for a long moment, then nodded slowly.
Then we do it right.
Every measurement, every calculation. No compromise. From that moment, I knew Arthur was not just an ally.
He was a cornerstone.
And together, we would prevent the disaster that Gideon and Dahlia would one day ignore. The construction site smelled of wet concrete, metal, and dust, a harsh, invigorating combination that reminded me why I had fallen in love with building in the first place. Standing among half-finished steel beams and the hum of machinery, I felt a strange mix of familiarity and urgency. This was the battlefield where Gideon's greed and Dahlia's manipulation would be stopped. Arthur was reviewing logs near a set of freshly poured columns, clipboard in hand, his stance calm yet purposeful. Every worker around him moved efficiently, respecting the precise orders he gave, yet their eyes held trust in the man who ensured their safety. I had admired him from afar, always aware of the quiet authority he wielded without need for showmanship. Now, I had to convince him that the problem I brought him was urgent and that our work together could prevent catastrophe. "Arthur," I called, keeping my voice low over the din of the site. He looked up, eyes narrowing slightly, as if assessing whether I belonged here. "You shouldn't be here," he said, not unkindly, just matter of fact. "This isn't a classroom. It's a construction site. Hazardous." "I know," I said, lifting the log in my hand. "But I need your attention. That beam over there, the central support column marked 3B, is compromised. Dahlia, working for Gideon, hit it years later. If this is deployed without reinforcement, it will fail in 5 years. And not quietly, it will collapse from latent stress before anyone suspects." Arthur's eyes flickered to the column, then back to me. There was no disbelief in his gaze, only measured caution, as if he were testing whether I understood the stakes. "You're telling me this now," he said slowly.
Why?
"Why not tell someone else years ago?" "Because I've been given the chance to prevent it," I replied, my voice steady. "I can't let the same mistakes happen again. I need your commitment to uncompromised safety. Not shortcuts. Not appearances. Real, structural integrity." For a moment, he studied me quietly, the hum of machinery filling the space between our words. Then he nodded, his jaw tightening slightly. "If what you say is true, then we stop it. Every calculation, every reinforcement, every inspection. No compromise." I exhaled, relief washing over me. Arthur had not only accepted the task, he had taken ownership of it, just as I had hoped. Together, we began walking the site, comparing logs, sketches, and structural blueprints. My mind raced, recalling every detail of the final tower design I had once created under Gideon's direction. Every hidden flaw, every cost-cutting shortcut he would eventually allow, I had memorized. And now I shared it with Arthur, layer by layer, making sure nothing was left to chance. As we moved from one section to another, I noticed the subtle way Arthur's presence grounded me. The chaos of the site, the looming threat of Gideon, the memory of betrayal, all of it faded slightly under his calm authority. He wasn't flashy or imposing, but he was unshakable. I realized quietly that I trusted him more than anyone I had ever known. "You move fast for someone so young," he said at one point, glancing at my sketches. "Most architects hesitate at this stage. They don't anticipate how construction crews interpret their plans. You understand both sides." "I have to," I said. "I've seen what happens when ambition overrides ethics. Lives are at stake. I won't let that happen again." Arthur's eyes softened, though his focus never wavered from the blueprints. "Then we make it right. Together." The words, simple as they were, carried weight I hadn't expected. Together. Not alone, not trapped under Gideon's manipulations, but together. In that moment, I realized that this partnership was not just about safety, it was about trust, and perhaps something deeper that neither of us dared name yet. We spent the remainder of the day mapping out interventions, calculating reinforcements, and ensuring every decision adhered to the strictest standards. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the skeletal structures, and I felt a quiet satisfaction. For the first time in years, I wasn't powerless. I wasn't fighting alone. And somewhere deep inside, I felt the first flicker of hope, and maybe even something more, for the man walking beside me. The foundation wasn't just concrete and steel. It was trust. And from it, everything else could rise. The morning light slanted across the unfinished tower, casting long shadows on the scaffolding. I walked the site with Arthur, clipboard in hand, my eyes scanning every weld, every bolt, every section of the floor we had reinforced. Each calculation, each adjustment, was a quiet rebellion against the empire Gideon was building on greed and deception. Arthur moved with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to responsibility. He pointed out minor issues, recalculated stresses, and adjusted blueprints on the fly. His focus never wavered, and I felt a strange comfort in the steadiness of his presence. I realized that, despite the constant danger posed by Gideon's shortcuts, working beside Arthur made the chaos bearable. But chaos had a way of finding me. I noticed it first in the way Dahlia hovered near the office trailers, her perfectly polished shoes clicking against concrete as she surveyed the site with an almost predatory precision. She had always been efficient to the point of cruelty, and now her efficiency masked malice. She moved papers, deleted logs, and issued directives under the guise of administrative necessity, all designed to undermine our safety measures while keeping Gideon blissfully unaware. "Dahlia's been at it again," I murmured to Arthur as we walked past a section of the site where a beam we had reinforced was mysteriously marked as compliant in the logs. Arthur frowned, his hand resting on the clipboard like an anchor. "She's covering something. That's not an error. It's intentional." I bit back my frustration. Every time she does this, she's one step ahead of Gideon. And he's too blind to notice until it's too late. Arthur's gaze met mine, steady and unwavering. Then we stayed 2 steps ahead. Every time. We moved through the building together, double-checking every reinforced column and crossbeam. The sun climbed higher, and with it came Gideon's presence, unannounced and menacing. He appeared in the office trailer doorway, tailored suit flawless, expression carefully neutral. But I knew him too well. The slight twitch of his jaw, the way his eyes calculated every movement, every interaction. "Cassandra," he said smoothly, walking toward us. "I hear you've been making adjustments without my approval." Arthur stepped slightly in front of me, his posture protective but professional. "I make adjustments to ensure safety, Mr. Gideon. That's my job." Gideon's eyes flicked to me, a smirk playing at his lips. "Safety is important," he said slowly, "but efficiency is what keeps this project profitable. You're losing sight of the bigger picture." "I see the bigger picture," I said, voice steady, meeting his gaze. "It's a building that will stand for decades, not just one that looks good on paper." Dahlia appeared behind him then, like a shadow of calculated efficiency. "I can handle internal coordination," she said sweetly, voice syrupy, while Cassandra focuses on the artistic side. Her meaning was clear. She intended to strip me of authority entirely. I felt the familiar sting of betrayal, tempered by the fire of determination. I would not let them destroy the integrity of my work. And I wouldn't let Gideon intimidate me again, not when Arthur and I were aligned. Arthur's hand brushed mine as we stepped away from Gideon, a small but grounding gesture that spoke more than words could. "We'll handle it," he said quietly, just for me. "She can't compromise what we've built." That moment, brief and private, sent a warmth through me. In the middle of danger and deceit, there was an anchor, a man whose integrity matched my own, whose presence was both protective and reassuring. My heart stirred, a quiet awareness that this partnership was growing into something far more than professional. The rest of the day passed in a tense rhythm, inspections, recalculations, and quiet strategy sessions to anticipate Dahlia's next moves. Every time she tried to manipulate a report or reorder a schedule, Arthur and I were there, intercepting, correcting, and strengthening the structure we knew would one day be a fortress of truth. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the skeletal tower in fiery orange light, I lingered on a scaffolding platform, looking down at the reinforced floors below. The building was beginning to reflect more than just my design. It reflected my resolve, my ethics, and now, the subtle presence of Arthur beside me, the steady hand I could lean on. Gideon and Dahlia might be plotting, but I was ready. And for the first time in months, I felt something that had nothing to do with fear or betrayal, a quiet, burgeoning trust, and perhaps, just beneath the surface, the first hints of something far more intimate. The tower wasn't just concrete and steel anymore. It was a test, a battlefield, and the start of a connection I couldn't yet name, but would soon come to define my life. The site was quieter than usual that morning, a deceptive calm before the storm I knew was coming. I walked beside Arthur, clipboard in hand, tracing our reinforced beams and cross supports. Every measurement, every calculation, was an act of defiance against Gideon's greed and Dahlia's subtle sabotage. But the quiet gave me a moment to notice him, to notice the way he moved with unwavering precision, the way his presence seemed to make the chaotic world of construction feel ordered, even safe. Arthur glanced up from a set of schematics he was reviewing. "I've adjusted the column load calculations again," he said, voice low and precise. "I want to be certain this section can handle 5 times the expected stress. If Dahlia tries to hide anything, we'll catch it." I nodded, impressed but also quietly grateful. There was something about his calm determination that soothed the constant tension I carried like a second skin. I realized I had begun to anticipate his glances, the faint arch of his brow when something concerned him, and even the subtle way his hand hovered near mine when passing tools or notes. "Arthur," I said quietly, stopping near a reinforced floor section, "I don't just trust your judgment. I rely on it." His head turned toward me, and for a fraction of a second, the professional mask faltered. His eyes softened in a way that made my chest tighten, an intimate recognition I hadn't expected. "And I trust yours, Cassandra," he said, voice even but heavy with meaning. "More than anyone else's. You see things most people overlook: integrity, safety, the long-term impact. That's why this project matters." I felt heat rise to my cheeks, but the satisfaction in knowing he valued me, my work, my insight, was overpowering any embarrassment. It was the first time I felt truly seen, not as an employee, not as Gideon's wife, but as someone capable and worthy of trust. Our quiet moment was broken by the sudden clatter of heels against concrete. Dahlia appeared at the scaffolding stairs, clipboard in hand, perfectly polished and smiling as if danger could never touch her. "Cassandra," she said, her voice smooth and deadly, "I noticed your adjustments to the central beams. Fascinating, but unnecessary. We have deadlines to meet, and your insistence on caution is slowing progress." Arthur's jaw tightened, and I saw the tension flare in his eyes. "Unnecessary," he said, voice low but firm. "Safety is never unnecessary. You don't compromise on the foundation of a building, Dahlia, no matter how many deadlines you have." Dahlia's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she recovered quickly. "You always exaggerate, Arthur. Some flexibility is needed for efficiency." I stepped closer, standing beside him, and felt the warmth of his body as we faced her together. "There's no flexibility when people's lives are at stake," I said. "We're not building just for profit or appearances. Every bolt, every beam, every calculation matters, and we won't ignore it." Her eyes narrowed, calculating, but she said nothing more, retreating with a perfunctory nod. Arthur let out a slow breath, and I noticed his arm brush mine as he turned back to the schematics. That small, accidental touch sent a shiver up my spine. "Careful," he murmured quietly, though I wasn't sure if he was referring to the work or the moment. "I will be," I replied, my heart beating faster than it should have in a professional setting. "We'll get through this together." The day passed in a blur of inspections, recalculations, and subtle strategy sessions to counteract Dahlia's interference. But with every shared glance, every brush of hands over a set of notes, every quiet acknowledgement of one another's expertise, I felt a connection growing, solid, grounding, and real. Later, as the sun dipped below the unfinished skyline, Arthur lingered behind, checking final reports. I stayed near him, reluctant to leave. The site was emptying, and the city's hum felt distant, leaving just the two of us in the fading light. "You're more than an architect," he said softly, eyes tracing my silhouette against the steel and glass of the skeletal tower. "You're someone who shapes more than buildings. You shape safety, lives, integrity. I admire that, Cassandra." My chest tightened at the depth of his words, and I felt something shift between us. It wasn't just respect or trust anymore. It was the first, tentative stirrings of something personal, something warm and undeniable. "I admire you too, Arthur," I admitted, voice low. "More than I should probably say right now." He smiled faintly, just enough to make my heart race. "Then we'll keep building," he said.
Together.
"Not just the tower, but everything else that matters." And I knew, as we packed up our tools and the sun disappeared behind the horizon, that the foundation we were laying wasn't just concrete and steel. It was trust, and perhaps, quietly, love. The office trailers were empty when I arrived that morning, the silence punctuated only by the hum of air conditioners and the distant clatter of machinery. I found Arthur already at the plans, reviewing yesterday's notes and calculations. His brow was furrowed, eyes scanning every detail with a precision that both reassured and intimidated me. "You've been busy," I said, trying to sound casual, though my chest still raced from the encounter with Dahlia yesterday. Arthur didn't look up immediately. "Busy is an understatement," he murmured, finally meeting my gaze. There was an intensity there I couldn't ignore, the kind that made my stomach flutter and my mind sharpen at the same time. "She's trying to manipulate the logs again. If we don't catch this, the central support could be misrepresented in the reports to management." I felt a surge of resolve. "Then we stop her. Every time." I moved closer, leaning over the same plans, our shoulders brushing. The contact was brief but electric, sending warmth through my chest and grounding me amidst the stress of the project. Arthur's hand hovered near mine, adjusting a sheet of calculations, and I noticed the subtle tension in his stance, the way he exuded both authority and protection. "Cassandra, we need to anticipate Gideon too. He's going to notice the reinforcements and will try to minimize them. He thrives on appearances." I nodded, heart quickening at the thought of confronting him again. "I'm ready. I've seen what he's capable of. And I know I'm not alone this time." His gaze softened, just for a fraction of a second, and I felt my chest tighten. "You're not," he said quietly, his voice low enough for only me to hear. "We're in this together. Every calculation, every inspection, and everything else that comes after." The weight of his words settled over me. Everything else that comes after. It wasn't just reassurance. It was a promise, subtle yet unshakable. My pulse quickened, and I had to take a deep breath to focus on the task at hand. We spent the next few hours cross-referencing structural logs, correcting intentional misrepresentations by Dahlia and reinforcing beams that she had tried to mark as compliant. Each step was a small victory against deceit, but every time I caught a glimpse of her walking through the site, smiling at Gideon, manipulating his perception, I felt a chill. She was clever, efficient, and dangerous in a way that demanded constant vigilance. At lunch, Arthur and I shared a quiet moment at the edge of the site. The air was heavy with dust and sunlight, and I realized how rare it was to have a companion who understood the stakes, someone whose presence made even the tension bearable. "You're incredible, Cassandra," he said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Not just for your talent, but for your integrity. You refuse to compromise, even when the pressure is unbearable. That takes courage." I looked at him, heart tightening. "And you?" I asked softly. "You shoulder this responsibility, knowing Gideon would never recognize your authority. You protect people, structures, even me. How do you stay so steady?" He reached out, lightly touching my hand over the blueprints. The gesture was protective, grounding, and intimate. "Because I can rely on you too. We protect each other. That's how we survive." I swallowed, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. The project, the stakes, the danger, They all seemed secondary for a moment to this quiet connection, this understanding that we were no longer just partners in construction, but partners in trust. As we returned to the logs and beams, I realized something important. The foundation we were reinforcing wasn't just concrete and steel. It was our partnership, and something deeper, slowly growing between us, like a hidden support beam that would bear the weight of both our professional and personal lives. Even in the shadow of Gideon's schemes and Dahlia's cunning, I knew one thing for certain. We were unbreakable together, and nothing, no shortcut, no deception, would compromise that. The morning air on the construction site was sharp with the scent of wet concrete and sawdust, but beneath it, I felt a tension that made my stomach tighten. Today wasn't about inspections or reinforcements, it was about Gideon. He had started noticing the changes we'd implemented, and I knew it was only a matter of time before his frustration turned into action. Arthur was already at the edge of the scaffolding, reviewing logs, his posture calm but alert. "He's watching," he said, not looking up from his clipboard. "Dahlia is feeding him information, but he won't fully understand the adjustments. That's our advantage." I nodded, trying to focus, but my mind kept drifting to the subtle touch of his hand on mine yesterday, the protective way he had guided me through the chaos. It was dangerous to think like this now, but I couldn't help it. Arthur wasn't just a colleague. He had become my anchor, steady and reliable amid the storm of Gideon and Dahlia's schemes. Our strategy was simple but effective. Every reinforcement, every corrected log, every safety protocol was now documented and duplicated. Gideon couldn't undo what we had hidden in plain sight, and Dahlia's attempts at manipulation were becoming increasingly obvious. By mid-afternoon, Gideon finally appeared, his tailored suit immaculate, his smirk thin and calculated. "Cassandra," he said, stepping onto the site, "I hear you've been making unauthorized adjustments again. Careful, you might undermine efficiency." Arthur stepped beside me, firm and unwavering. "We are ensuring the integrity of the building. That is my responsibility, and Cassandra's guidance is critical. No shortcuts will be allowed." Gideon's eyes flicked between us, frustration barely masked. He turned to leave, but Dahlia's presence at his side betrayed him. Her calculated efficiency couldn't hide her panic. Every document, every reinforced calculation we had implemented left a visible trace of our vigilance. Later, in the quiet of the office trailer, Arthur and I reviewed the day's events. The adrenaline of facing Gideon had left me shaking slightly, but Arthur's hand found mine again, firm and grounding. "You did well today," he said softly, voice low. "We exposed the cracks in their facade." I looked at him, the warmth of his presence radiating through me. "We did it together," I replied. "And it feels right." He leaned closer, just enough that our shoulders brushed, and I felt my heart quicken. "It does," he murmured. "And we'll keep doing it. Floor by floor, beam by beam, nothing he tries will compromise this building or us." I smiled, a quiet, relieved smile. In the shadow of Gideon's schemes and Dahlia's duplicity, we had found strength not only in our strategy, but in each other. The subtle intimacy between us, trust, respect, shared purpose, was solidifying like the foundations we protected. As the sun dipped behind the skeletal tower, I realized the truth. We weren't just building a safe, ethical structure. We were constructing something far more personal, something lasting. And with Arthur by my side, I finally felt secure enough to imagine a life where betrayal could be countered not just by strategy, but by love. The city's skyline glowed under the first light of dawn, steel and glass gleaming like a promise. The tower that had once been Gideon's playground of greed now stood as a testament to integrity, to careful design, and to the countless hours Arthur and I had poured into it. The public exposure of Gideon's shortcuts and Dahlia's schemes had destroyed his reputation, and regulators ensured his empire could no longer risk lives for profit. Standing on the roof of our now completed section, I felt the wind tug at my hair, the same wind that had once carried the weight of betrayal. But now, it felt different, like liberation. I turned toward Arthur, who had been silently reviewing the final reports, his gaze softening when he caught mine. "You did it," I said, my voice trembling with relief and pride. "We did it." Arthur stepped closer, the faintest touch of his hand brushing against mine as he handed me the final set of documents. The contact sent a shiver through me, electric and grounding all at once. "We," he corrected gently, "always work better together." I couldn't stop the smile that spread across my face. It was more than gratitude. It was trust, admiration, and the quiet stirring of something much deeper. "I don't think I've ever trusted anyone the way I trust you," I admitted, heart pounding in my chest. Arthur's eyes softened, and without a word, he reached for me fully, taking both my hands in his. His grip was firm, protective, yet gentle, as if he could hold not just my body, but every fear and doubt I had carried for years. "Then you never have to," he said, voice low and intimate. "I've got you." My breath caught, and for a moment the city and the tower faded. All that existed was him, the warmth of his hands, the solid presence of his body against mine. I stepped closer, leaning into him, feeling the tension of months of fear and pressure dissolve under the safety of his touch. "Arthur," I whispered, my lips barely brushing his jaw in a tentative, electric touch. He responded instantly, tilting his head and capturing my lips in a slow, deliberate kiss that left me breathless. It was more than a kiss. It was affirmation, connection, and something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. His hands moved to my waist, strong and steady, pulling me closer, and I felt the steady beat of his heart against mine. The world seemed to pause, the hum of the city fading beneath the rhythm of our breaths. I wrapped my arms around his neck, deepening the kiss, letting every unspoken fear, every lingering doubt, and every hidden longing pass between us. When we finally parted, both of us breathing a little heavier, Arthur rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted this for us for a long time," he murmured. "And now we can have everything else too. Not just the tower, but life." A laugh, light and full of relief, escaped me. "Everything else," I echoed, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the morning sun. The tension of months, the betrayal, the sabotage, the constant fight for integrity, melted away, leaving only the promise of what we had built together. He kissed me again, slower this time, lingering, as if every second could make up for lost years. I felt safe, cherished, and utterly alive. When he held me close afterward, it wasn't just protection. It was belonging, grounding, a home I hadn't realized I'd been searching for. Weeks later, we opened our ethical development and construction firm, a living testament to the principles we had fought for. Every project, every blueprint, and every contract reflected the values we had refused to compromise. And through it all, Arthur and I remained each other's constant, partners in work, life, and love. Sometimes, when standing on the roof of a completed building, I would glance at him and feel that same shiver of connection, the touch of his hand, the warmth of his embrace, the security of knowing that no matter the storm, we had built something lasting together. The tower had stood the test of ethics, scrutiny, and time. And so had we. Arthur drew me into his arms one evening, holding me as the sunset painted the city in gold. "This is our life now," he said softly, kissing my temple. "Built on trust, integrity, and love." I rested my head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat align with mine. "Our perfect foundation," I whispered. And for the first time in years, I knew it was true. We had survived betrayal, exposed corruption, and built a life worth everything. With Arthur, I had found my home, my anchor, and my happily ever after.